Imagine you're a medieval peasant, tending your fields at dusk. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. You're exhausted from a long day's work, when suddenly the ground trembles. What was that? You freeze. Your heart starts pounding. You look up and see something massive circling overhead, scales glinting in the dying light, wings so enormous they literally blot out the sun, and then a roar that shakes your very bones. Dragons, for thousands of years, across every single continent, separated by vast oceans and towering mountains, cultures that never, ever met each other, all described the same creature. Think about that for a second. The Chinese knew them. The Vikings feared them. The ancient Greeks warned about them. The Aztecs worshipped them. How is that possible? How did humanity spread across the entire planet with no way to communicate? All dream of the same monster? Today, we're diving deep into the reality of dragons. And trust me, the truth, it's way more fascinating than you think. Let's start with something absolutely mind-blowing. Dragons are literally everywhere in human history. I'm not exaggerating. Every single culture. In China, the dragon, or long as they call it, isn't a monster at all. No, it's a symbol of power, wisdom, and good fortune. Chinese dragons are serpentine, elegant, wise, and they bring rain to nourish the crops. The emperors themselves, they claim to be descendants of dragons. Imagine telling people your great-great-grandfather was a dragon. Meanwhile, on the complete opposite side of the world, in medieval Europe, dragons were the ultimate evil, the embodiment of darkness and chaos. They hoarded mountains of gold, destroyed entire villages with their flames, and could only be defeated by the bravest, most heroic knights. St. George slaying the dragon? That became one of Christianity's most famous legends. But wait, there's more. The Vikings, those fierce Norse warriors. They told stories of Nidhogger, a terrifying dragon that gnawed at the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree itself. This wasn't just any tree. This was the tree that held the entire universe together. In Hindu mythology, there's the Vritra, a dragon so powerful it held back the waters of the world. It took the god Indra himself to defeat it and bring water back to the people. And the Aztecs? They had Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, a dragon with beautiful plumage, worshipped as a deity of wind, air, and learning. Here's what's absolutely crazy about all this. These cultures developed independently, completely, independently. They didn't have phones. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have boats that could cross oceans. They couldn't share notes. Yet, somehow, they all created remarkably similar creatures. Reptilian? Check. Enormous? Check. Powerful? Absolutely, and almost always associated with either chaos or divine power. So what's going on here? Did dragons actually exist? Spoiler alert, not the fire-breathing kind you're thinking of, soaring through medieval skies. But the answer to where dragons come from? That's where things get really, really interesting. Think of it like this, and stay with me here. If you showed someone who'd never seen a car, let's say a person from a remote tribe, and you showed them a bicycle, then a motorcycle, and then a bus, what would they notice? They'd notice the similarities, right? Wheels, transportation, forward motion. Dragons are humanity's way of processing something fundamental about our world and our fears. But what exactly? What were ancient people actually seeing? Let's time travel for a moment. Are you ready? Picture this. You're living in ancient Greece. maybe around 400 BCE. You're a simple villager. You're digging a well for your community because your village desperately needs water. It's hot. You're sweating. Your muscles ache. When suddenly, clang, your shovel hits something hard. What is it? A rock? You brush away the dirt, carefully, and you find bones. But these aren't just any bones. Oh no, these are massive bones. We're talking about a skull the size of a wine barrel, with huge hollow eye sockets that seem to stare right through you, and bizarre, elongated jaws lined with what looks like teeth the size of daggers. Your hands are shaking now. What is this thing? You have no concept of dinosaurs. That word won't even be invented for over 2,000 years. Evolution? Charles Darwin won't theorize about that until another 2,000 years pass. So, what do you think you found? A dragon, obviously. What else could it possibly be? And here's the thing. This actually happened. This isn't speculation. Historians now believe that many, if not most, dragon legends originated from people discovering dinosaur fossils. Let me blow your mind even more. The ancient Greeks? They found Protoceratops fossils in the gold mining regions of Central Asia. These skulls, with their distinctive beaked mouths and those prominent frills extending from their heads. They look remarkably like the griffin legends that emerged from the exact same area. Coincidence? I don't think so. In China, dragon bones were used in traditional medicine for centuries. For centuries. Guess what they actually were? Go on, guess. Fossilized dinosaur and mammoth bones. The Chinese were literally grinding up paleontology specimens, priceless scientific evidence, because they thought they were magical dragon remains. Museums around the world are still trying to recover some of these fossils today. Want another one? The Cyclops legend. You know, the one-eyed giant from Greek mythology, probably dwarf elephant skulls. Wait, what? How does that work? Mediterranean islands are absolutely littered with these skulls. And here's the kicker, the large central nasal cavity, where the elephant's trunk attached. It looks exactly like a single giant eye socket if you don't know what you're looking at. Ancient Greeks found these skulls and thought, one eye, massive size. This must be a Cyclops. Think about the psychological impact for a second. Put yourself in their sandals. You're an ancient person. Your understanding of natural history is basically zero. You don't know about extinction, you don't know about evolution, and suddenly you find evidence, proof, that creatures the size of houses once walked the earth. What would you think? Your mind would fill in the gaps with the scariest thing you can imagine. Add some fire-breathing capability, give it massive wings, and boom, dragon legend is born. But fossils? Fossils are only part of the story. Oh, it gets so much better. Now, let's talk about the animals that were actually alive and terrifying when humans first started telling these stories. First up, crocodiles and alligators. Imagine you're living in ancient Mesopotamia or Egypt. The year is maybe 3000 BCE. The Nile River? It's your lifeline. Everything depends on it. Your crops, your water, your entire civilization. But there's a problem. It's also home to massive armored reptiles that can grow over 20 feet long, have jaws powerful enough to crush bone like it's a twig. And sometimes they eat people, not as a mistake, not by accident. They hunt humans. Crocodiles are literally living dinosaurs. They survived the mass extinction that killed the T-Rex. They have those thick, armored scales, rows and rows of razor-sharp teeth, that cold reptilian appearance, and those eyes, those dead, calculating eyes. They're ambush predators that can stay completely submerged for hours, just waiting, watching. To ancient peoples, these were absolutely 100% dragon-like creatures. The Egyptian god Sobek, depicted as a crocodile-headed deity. That shows you exactly how these creatures inspired both terror and reverence. Divine terror. Then there's the Komodo dragon, which is literally called a dragon, the largest living lizard on Earth. It can grow 10 feet long. It has venomous saliva that causes its victims to bleed out. It can run 12 miles per hour, faster than most humans, and it has been known to attack and kill people. When European explorers first arrived in Indonesia in the early 1900s and heard stories from the islanders about giant, deadly lizards that could take down a water buffalo, they thought the locals were describing mythical creatures. Yeah, sure, giant deadly lizards. Right, they literally didn't believe them. Nope, real animals. Very, very real. Let's go even weirder, shall we? The Olm. Ever heard of it? Probably not. This is a blind, cave-dwelling salamander from Europe that can live over 100 years. It's pale white, almost ghostly, completely blind because it lives in absolute darkness, and it has this long, serpentine body. When heavy rains would wash them out of their caves in medieval times, people would find these pale, writhing, serpentine creatures, and they'd call them, what? Baby dragons. What else would you call a strange, serpentine creature you'd never seen before? And we can't forget about whales. Before we understood marine biology, before we had submarines and underwater photography, sailors constantly reported sea serpents. These weren't just occasional sightings. These were constant reports from experienced sailors. Why? A whale's undulating swimming pattern, when seen from a distance or in rough seas, looks exactly like a serpentine dragon moving through water. The humps of its back rising and falling through the waves. Dragon coils. Multiple whales swimming in a line. A sea serpent with multiple humps. And then there's the oarfish. This creature can grow up to 36 feet long. It's ribbon-like, silvery, and it usually lives in the deep ocean where we never see it. But occasionally, when one gets sick or injured, it surfaces and terrifies anyone unlucky enough to see its bizarre, alien body. Here's an analogy that'll make this all click. Imagine you lived before science explained things, before biology, before zoology, before we categorized and understood the natural world. You spend your entire life around familiar animals, sheep, chickens, cows, horses, animals that are predictable and safe. Then, one day, you see a creature that's 20 feet long, covered in thick scales or tough, armored skin, potentially venomous, possibly man-eating, and utterly unlike anything you've ever encountered before. Your brain immediately categorizes it as other, something alien, something dangerous. That's it. That's the psychological seed of the dragon right there. The fear of the unknown. The terror of encountering something that doesn't fit into your understanding of the world. Okay. Let's get to the question you're all wondering about, right? The big question. Could a biological dragon actually exist? Like, could evolution produce a real, fire-breathing, flying dragon? The short answer, no. Absolutely not. But let's talk about why, because honestly, it's fascinating. The biology here is incredible. First, the fire-breathing problem. Some people point to bombardier beetles as proof that fire-breathing could evolve. Look, they say, These beetles spray boiling chemicals from their abdomen. If a tiny beetle can do it, why not a dragon? But here's the scale problem, and it's a big one. A beetle is maybe an inch long. Maybe. A dragon, as we imagine it, would need to be house-sized. The amount of flammable chemical storage required would be enormous. We're talking about gallons and gallons of highly combustible material stored inside a living creature, right next to all its organs. That's incredibly dangerous to the dragon itself. One wrong move and boom, the dragon explodes. It's evolutionarily impractical. Natural selection would never favor a creature that carries around enough explosive material to blow itself up. Plus, and this is crucial, fire breathing requires ignition. You need a spark, an actual flame. Animals are wet, fleshy things. We're like 70% water. Creating sustained flames inside your body without literally cooking yourself from the inside out? Not happening. You'd need specialized organs made of materials that simply don't exist in biology. Heat-resistant tissues that can withstand temperatures of over 1,000 degrees? That's not organic material. That's industrial ceramic. Then, there's the flight problem. The largest flying bird that ever existed was Argentavis magnificens. Magnificent name, right? It had a wingspan of 23 feet. That's huge, and it weighed about 150 pounds. That's basically the maximum size for a flying bird. The largest pterosaurs, like Quetzalcoatlus, those enormous flying reptiles from the dinosaur age, they probably maxed out around 500 to 550 pounds. Why? What's the limit? Because flight has a hard physical limit called the square cube law, and it's brutal. Here's the analogy. If you double an animal's size in all dimensions, so you make it twice as tall, twice as wide, twice as long, its weight increases by 8 times. But its wing surface area, that only increases by 4 times. See the problem? Eventually, you get too heavy to fly. The wings simply cannot generate enough lift. Birds solve this with hollow bones, air sacs throughout their bodies, incredibly efficient respiratory systems. Even then, anything much bigger than an albatross really struggles with sustained flight. Now, imagine a dragon, as typically imagined, the size of a house, with thick, armored scales for protection, massive muscle mass to power those wings and generate fire, plus those flame-producing organs we talked about, plus a large brain for that famous dragon intelligence. We're talking about a creature that would weigh several tons. At minimum, probably closer to 10 tons. No amount of wing flapping, no amount of muscle power would get that off the ground on Earth's gravity and atmosphere. The laws of physics simply don't allow it. And don't even get me started on the energetics, the energy requirements. Flying is incredibly energy intensive. It's the most expensive form of locomotion in nature. Birds need to eat constantly. Hummingbirds eat half their body weight in nectar every single day just to survive. A dragon, a creature that size, it would need to eat constantly. We're talking about consuming entire cow herds daily, maybe hourly, just to maintain its metabolism, just to keep its body temperature up and its muscles functioning. Where would it find that much food? How would it survive? It would drive itself to extinction just from eating everything in sight. But here's what's cool. Here's what's actually beautiful about this. Dragons are impossible in a way that makes them perfect. They represent the apex of what we fear and admire. They're every predator rolled into one. They're evolution taken to a mythical extreme. They exist in that sweet spot of being just believable enough to fuel our imaginations. but impossible enough to remain safely in the realm of myth. So, if dragons never existed, if they can't exist, why do we still love them? Why are they in everything? Game of Thrones, dragons, The Hobbit, dragon, children's movies, dragons, video games, dragons everywhere. Why? What's the appeal? Because dragons aren't really about biology. They never were. Dragons are about psychology. They're about us, about humanity and what we fear and what we aspire to be. In virtually every culture on Earth, dragons represent chaos, power, and transformation. They're the ultimate challenge, the final boss, the thing you must overcome to prove yourself. In Western traditions, slaying a dragon is the hero's journey incarnate. You face your greatest fear, you overcome impossible odds, and you emerge transformed. You're no longer the person who started the journey. St. George killing the dragon, Beowulf fighting the dragon in his final battle, sacrificing himself to save his people, Bilbo confronting Smaug in his mountain of gold. These aren't just adventure stories. They're metaphors for personal growth. The dragon is the mountain you must climb, the job interview that terrifies you, the difficult conversation you've been avoiding, the dissertation you need to finish, the addiction you need to overcome. It's external, yes, a physical challenge, but it's also internal. It's your own limitations, your fears, your self-doubt made manifest, made into something you can actually fight. In Eastern traditions, dragons are wisdom and power you must learn to work with, not against. Becoming one with the dragon doesn't mean killing it. It means mastering yourself, achieving balance, understanding the forces of nature rather than trying to dominate them. It's a completely different philosophy. The dragon isn't evil. It's natural, it's powerful, and you need to respect it, understand it, harmonize with it. Here's something beautiful that I absolutely love. We keep reinventing dragons for each generation. They evolve with us. Medieval dragons, they guarded hoards of gold. They represented greed and the dangers of material wealth. But modern dragons, they're often misunderstood creatures, intelligent beings with their own perspectives, creatures that humans have wronged. We've gone from How to Train Your Dragon, teaching us about acceptance and understanding those who are different, to The Last Dragon, exploring cultural heritage and identity, to dragons in modern fantasy literature, representing nuclear weapons, or climate change, or environmental destruction. Dragons evolve because we evolve. They're mirrors. They reflect back whatever we're dealing with at that moment in history. Think about what scared medieval people: starvation, invasion by foreign armies, plague and disease, the unknown wilderness beyond their villages. Their dragons reflected those fears. Dragons hoarded food, invaded from the sky, brought pestilence, lived in the dark forests. What scares us today? Loss of control, environmental collapse, the consequences of our own power and technology, the feeling that we've created forces we can no longer control. And look at our dragons now. They're often reflections of those anxieties. Dragons as weapons of mass destruction. Dragons as forces of nature taking revenge on humanity. Dragons as ancient powers awakened by our carelessness. So, what's the reality of dragons? Here's the truth. They're real, just not in the way we once thought. They're real in our collective imagination, born from scattered fossils that confused ancient people, from terrifying reptiles that hunted our ancestors, from natural disasters that we couldn't explain, and from the universal human need to personify our greatest challenges. Dragons are real in the way that all great myths are real. They tell us fundamental truths about ourselves. They show us that humans, everywhere, across all time and all cultures, have grappled with the same essential questions. How do we face overwhelming odds? What do we do when confronted with forces beyond our understanding? How do we balance power and wisdom? How do we overcome our own limitations? The bones in the ground? Those were from dinosaurs, real creatures, but extinct for millions of years. The sea serpents that sailors reported, those were whales, magnificent creatures, but not monsters. The fire-breathing? That was imagination, human creativity filling in the gaps. But the courage to face dragons, whether they're scaled monsters or metaphorical obstacles, that is absolutely real. The determination to stand up to something that terrifies you, that's real. The wisdom to understand forces greater than yourself, that's real. The transformation that comes from overcoming your greatest challenge, that is absolutely 100% real. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most important reality of all. Dragons teach us that we're capable of more than we think, that we can face the impossible, that we can grow and change and become heroes of our own stories. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the reality of dragons, if you learned something new, if this changed how you think about mythology and human history, then smash that like button. Seriously, hit it. Let's get this video to as many people as possible. Subscribe for more myth-busting content. I've got videos planned on unicorns, phoenixes, werewolves, all the legendary creatures you've wondered about. And let me know in the comments, what's your favorite dragon from fiction and why? Is it Smaug, Drogon, Toothless, that dragon from Mulan? I want to know. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, keep being curious about the world.